Today we're working in Module 1, Lesson 10, and our objective is to subtract decimal numbers. The first problem we're going to take a look at is 10 tens minus 1 10 1/10. And I can see here that 10 tens would be the same as having 10 groups of 10, and that will equal 100. So now I'm going to take the number 100, and I'm going to be subtracting from that. Now, the second portion of that expression is 1 10 1/10. So if I think about place value, I know that here's my 10, my decimal point would come here, and then I also have 1/10, and that is the next place value here. So this is what 10, or 110, and 1/10 looks like. So I'm going to subtract that 10 and 1/10 from my 100. Now the most important thing when we're subtracting or adding decimals is that we line up our place values. So here, I'm going to put my 1 in my 10 because that's my tens place. The 0 in my 10 goes in my ones place, and then I also have my tens place I'm going to add there. Now because I have a 1 in my tens place in the bottom, but I don't have a number in the top portion, I need to go ahead and add a 0 there to hold that place value and so that I have something to subtract from. Now I cannot take 1 away from 0, so I need to borrow. And if you look in your ones place, again I have a 0, and if I look in my tens place, I still have a 0 there. So I can't subtract from any of those numbers. I need to come way over to my hundreds place, and I need to borrow from that. And so that 1 becomes a 0, and the 0 in my tens place becomes a 10. Now remember, I have to get a number way over into my tenths place, so I need to continue borrowing. Now my 10 is going to become a 9, and that makes the 0 in my ones place become a 10. And I'm going to borrow from my ones place now, and that 10 becomes a 9. And so now I have a 10 in my tenths place. And now we can go ahead and through and subtract. So 10 minus 1 equals 9. 9 minus 0 equals 9. 9 minus 1 equals 8. And I don't have anything here in this place value. It's a 0 now, so I don't need to bring that down. Now with our decimal point, you can see that they're lined up here between my ones place and my tens place, so I can go ahead and just pull that right down here. So the answer that we should have is 89 and 9/10. Our second problem is 91 and 49/100 minus 7/10. And again, the most important thing that we want to do when we are subtracting or adding is to line up those decimal points. So I wrote 91 and 49/100, and I'm going to line up my digits so that my decimal points are lined up. And then where you see these blank spaces here, like after my 7 and in front of my 0, I'm going to add zeros to hold those place values. And so we can begin subtracting. 9 minus 0 is 9. Now when I get to my tenths place, I see that I have a 7, and I'm subtracting 7 from 4. But I can't take 7 away from 4, so I'm going to go over to my ones place, and I'm going to borrow from there. And so that 1 becomes a 0, and my 4 becomes a 14, because when I take 1 away, that becomes 10 tenths. So that changes my 4 tenths to 14 tenths. Now 14 minus 7 equals 7. I bring my decimal point down. 0 minus 0 remains 0. And 9 minus 0 is 9. So this answer is 90 and 79/100. And lastly, we have 2 ones, 4/10 minus 59/100. So 2 ones, 4/10 can be written in standard form as 2.4. You'll notice that the 2 ones are in my ones place, and that in my tens place I have 4/10. Now from 2 ones and 4/10 I am subtracting 59/100. So again, I must line up my decimal points. And so my problem looks something like this. Now above my 9, in my hundreds place, I do not have a digit. So I'm going to put a 0 there to hold that place value. Now I cannot subtract 9 from 0. So I'm going to come over and borrow from my tenths place. And so that 4 becomes a 3. And my 0 in my hundredths place becomes a 10. So now I have 10 hundredths, and I'm subtracting 9 hundredths from that. So I'm left with 1. When I get to my tenths place, I'm subtracting 5 from 3, but I'm not able to take 5 away from 3, so I need to come over here to my ones place, and I'm going to borrow from there. My 2 becomes my 1, and when I take 1, 1 away, that 1, 1 turns into 10 tenths. So I'm adding 10 tenths to the 3 tenths that I already have, and that becomes 13 tenths. So 13 tenths minus 5 tenths leaves me with 8 tenths. I bring down my decimal point, and now I have 1, 1, and I'm taking 0 away from that. So I keep that 1. And so the answer that we have is 1 and 81 hundredths. This has been lesson 10 in module 1, and our objective has been to subtract decimal numbers.